When I pulled into the driveway of Blue Harbor House, I was holding a cake and a bottle of sparkling cider. My mother was crying. My father's hands were shaking. And standing in their kitchen was my brother-in-law, Brandon, pointing toward the door, shouting, "Get out of my house." Beside him, my sister Chloe laughed until she saw me. The locks had been changed. A stranger's SUV sat outside. And in that silence, I realized something terrible. They thought family meant ownership. But what they didn't know was, I'd built this house to never be stolen. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm 38 years old. And for most of my life, I believed control could save people. If I could fix what was broken, stitch the wound, balance the bill, calm the noise, then no one would fall apart. That belief started in a one-bedroom apartment with a leaking ceiling and a mother who cried quietly so my father wouldn't hear. Dad worked nights at the airport, patching planes that were already too old to fly. Mom cleaned houses and still made dinner like it mattered. My sister, Chloe, was always the bright one the kind teachers called a dreamer. When the lights flickered, she painted stars on the ceiling with glow-in-the-dark stickers. I memorized the sound of overdue notices sliding under the door. She memorized songs from TV commercials. There was a night I can't forget. Rain dripping through the ceiling. Mom sitting at the kitchen table, staring at an envelope. "We'll figure it out," I told her. I was 12. My voice shook. I took the bill, folded it in half, and tucked it under my mattress. "See? Gone." She smiled through red eyes and said, "You're a good boy, Ethan." I didn't know then that being good meant becoming everyone's emergency exit. Dad came home smelling of jet fuel, dropped his keys, kissed Mom's head, and said, "As long as we stick together." That line stuck to me like static. Sticking together meant silence. It meant swallowing anger before it became thunder. Years passed in that same rhythm work. Patch, repeat. Chloe got the attention. "She just needs a little help getting started," Mom would say. When I got a scholarship, the whole family celebrated for a night. By the weekend, Chloe had taken my laptop for a project. I found it later, cracked screen, covered in nail polish. "It was an accident," she said, and Mom hugged her before I could speak. I swallowed it, but it carved deeper than I thought. College was the first time I lived in a place where the walls didn't shake. I studied until my vision blurred. When the cafeteria closed, I ate cereal with water. I worked in a hospital laundry, folding sheets still warm from the dryer. Every paycheck went home. Mom called every Sunday. "Your sister's struggling," she'd whisper. Like a confession. "She just needs a boost." I wired what I had. She always said she'd pay it back. She never did. By the time I became a resident, my name had turned into a reflex, the fixer. Chloe called for tuition, then for rent, then for braces. "You make so much more than us," she'd say. Laughing like that made it fair. I learned to answer without emotion, just numbers. Each transfer felt like both rescue and resentment. Then came the night I was paged to the ER mid-surgery. Mom's blood pressure had spiked. I drove straight from the OR to her side. Chloe was there, crying louder than anyone, saying she'd been handling everything. But the bills on the counter told a different story. She'd maxed out Mom's credit card to fund her art studio. Dad just looked at me like he'd failed twice, once as a father, again as a man. I paid off the debt. Quietly, efficiently. I told myself peace was worth the price. But peace never stayed. 2 years ago, Chloe's husband, Brandon, came into the picture. He wore confidence like cologne, thick, choking, artificial. He called himself an entrepreneur but couldn't name a business that lasted more than 6 months. When they were evicted, I co-signed a new lease. "Just temporary," he said, grinning, beer in hand. Temporary turned into another year. Somewhere between surgeries and sleepless nights, I started saving, not for me, but for them. For my parents. They'd given up every comfort, every piece of themselves. They deserved a house that didn't hum with anxiety. A place where the ocean drowned out worry. I scrolled listings at 2 a.m. between operations until I found it. A crooked blue house on a bluff overlooking the bay. Blue Harbor House. I drove there on a Sunday. Salt wind, palm shadows, gulls crying like laughter. The floorboards creaked, the windows whistled, and I thought, finally, something honest. I pictured my mother's face when she'd smell the sea, my father's hands resting on the deck rail instead of a wrench. I closed on it quietly, in their names. Through a living trust, I prepaid taxes, HOA, maintenance for 20 years. I thought that would buy peace. It didn't. But I didn't know that yet. That night, I left the closing office with the keys in my palm. They felt heavier than they should have. Not metal memory. Every bill, every late fee, every silent dinner pressed into those keys. I told myself this was how you rewrite history with paperwork and precision. I didn't see the storm waiting behind the sold sign. I should have known better. The week after I closed on Blue Harbor House, I drove my parents there without telling them where we were going. Mom sat in the passenger seat, clutching her purse the way she always did when she felt undeserving of nice things. Dad stared out the window, silent, suspicious. When we reached the turnoff, the ocean opened like a secret, and the house appeared small, crooked, the deck painted white against the sky. Mom's hand went to her mouth. "Ethan, what is this?" "Home," I said. "Yours." Dad stepped out first. He touched the railing as if it might vanish. His voice cracked when he whispered, "Smells like salt." And second chances. Inside, sunlight poured through the windows, painting dust like gold. Mom opened every cabinet, running her fingers across new shelves as though she were tracing years she'd lost. I stocked the fridge, left a note in the silverware drawer. For late mornings and loud laughter. They stayed overnight. I inflated a cheap mattress in the guest room and fell asleep to waves hitting the rocks. For once, the world was quiet. I didn't know that peace was already on borrowed time. 2 days later, while I was prepping for surgery, Mom called. "Your sister saw the photo," she said. Her voice trembled. "What photo?" "Your father posted a sunset from the porch." She figured it out. By dinner, Chloe had driven 2 hours with Brandon, the kids, and their dog. "Just visiting," Mom said. "They'll leave Sunday." But Sunday came and went. Monday, too. When I asked, Mom whispered, "They're just helping fix a few things." Helping. That word again. It used to mean love. Now it meant invasion. The next text from Dad read, "Chloe keeps calling it the family house. Can you come?" Then nothing for a day. That night I scrubbed in for an emergency aneurysm repair. The OR lights burned cold, my hands steady over a stranger's open skull. But my thoughts were back at the coast. Every heartbeat of the monitor felt like a countdown. When I finished, I checked my phone. 17 missed calls. One photo from Chloe, her smiling in my parents' kitchen. Caption, "Home sweet home." Hashtag number manifesting. I drove straight to Blue Harbor House. The gate was open. Another car in the drive. The front door wide. I could hear cartoon voices inside. Mom was in the kitchen holding a towel like a surrender flag. Dad sat at the table, shoulders caved. Boxes everywhere. Then Brandon appeared barefoot, beer in hand, football jersey half tucked in. "This is my house," he said to my father. "Get out before you break a hip." Chloe laughed. "Relax, Dad. We're just getting settled." Something in me went quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before precision. That moment the towel, the laughter, the smell of cheap beer became the fuse I didn't know I'd been carrying for 30 years. I wish I could say it started there, but the truth is, this scene had been rehearsed my whole life. Every time I covered a bill, every time I said, "It's fine," I was building this moment. I just hadn't realized the house I'd bought wasn't the one by the sea. It was the same one we'd always lived in. The one made of guilt and obligation. The next morning, I met Chloe at a diner halfway between the hospital and the coast. She ordered pancakes and smiled like nothing was wrong. "You're overreacting," she said. "Mom's happy, Dad's resting. Brandon's fixing things. It's good for everyone." "Fixing?" I asked. She grinned. "You'll thank us later. We're listing it on Airbnb. Just for the summer. You know how much beachfront goes for?" I stared at her. "It's not a rental." She laughed. "Don't be dramatic, Ethan. You don't even live there." I didn't answer. I just watched syrup slide down her fork, slow and sticky, like the mess she always left behind. That night, I called Dad. His voice was low, embarrassed. "Maybe they just need time," he said. "Families should stick together." I looked out the window at the city lights. The same words echoing from decades ago, "stick together." The phrase that had built our prison. I opened my laptop. I checked the trust, the HOA bylaws, the property records. Everything was airtight. Still, I felt something inside me twist the old urge to fix it quietly, to keep the peace. But peace kept slipping through the same hands that created the chaos. I started gathering proof screenshots, emails, a copy of the trust in both paper and digital form. I hired a locksmith and told him to wait for my call. I wasn't sure what would happen next, only that this time, I wouldn't stay silent. And as I packed the folder labeled Family Trust, a thought cut through the noise. Maybe love isn't fixing what they break. Maybe love is finally letting the cracks show and refusing to pay for the damage again. When I reached Blue Harbor House again, the air didn't smell like salt anymore. It smelled like fried food and cheap air freshener. The porch light was on in the middle of the day, and someone had left a crushed soda can on the steps. Inside, chaos had roots. Toys scattered across the floor. Beach towels dripped on the couch I'd picked for my mother. My father sat in his chair, small against the noise. The TV blasted cartoons. Brandon leaned back like he owned oxygen. Chloe sat cross-legged, scrolling her phone. "Ethan," Mom said softly, as if my name might start a war. I looked at her eyes swollen, fingers twisting a dish towel again. "What's going on here?" Chloe didn't even look up. "We're settling in." "You don't live here," I said. Brandon laughed. "Family does. You gave the house to your parents. Your parents are family. We're their kids. Do the math, Doc." I wanted to argue, but Dad's hand trembled against the armrest. I remembered him in his work uniform, grease on his collar, still clapping at my high school graduation, even when his knuckles bled. He didn't deserve this humiliation. "Pack your things," I said quietly. Brandon smirked. "You gonna perform surgery on me if I don't?" Chloe snapped. "Stop, Brandon." Then she turned to me. "We'll talk later. Okay? Don't make a scene." Don't make a scene, our family's favorite phrase. The reason every wound got infected. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat outside in my car, watching their silhouettes move through the windows I'd paid for. The surf roared below, drowning out my thoughts. I typed out a message to Dad. "I'll handle this. Trust me." Then I deleted it. He trusted me enough already. In the morning, I drove back to Boston for rounds. Between patients, I checked my phone. New notifications. Chloe had posted a story video of the house tag number family retreat with music that made it sound wholesome. In the background, you could hear my mother asking her to stop filming. Chloe captioned it, "Can't believe we finally have a place by the ocean. So proud of my brother for giving back." I scrolled through comments. "Goals. You deserve it. Family love wins." My stomach turned. The narrative had already changed. That afternoon, Mark, my colleague, found me staring at my phone. "You okay?" "Family thing," I said. He snorted. "Aren't they all?" I half smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. By the weekend, it got worse. A message from Mom. They listed the house on Airbnb. Said it's temporary. She attached a screenshot. Brandon had made an account under Coastal Stay Management using photos from my father's Facebook. Title: Oceanfront Gem Sleep 6. The bookings calendar was full through August. I felt heat rise in my neck, the same way it does under surgical lights. Only this time, I wasn't holding a scalpel. I drove down again. The listing was real, the guests already messaging for directions. I walked in without knocking. Brandon looked up from the couch, beer can balanced on his knee. "You're trespassing," I said. He grinned. "Funny, I was gonna say the same thing." Chloe rushed over. "Ethan, please, not in front of the kids." Her son peeked around the corner. I crouched to his level. "Hey, buddy, why don't you go play outside for a bit?" He hesitated, then nodded. Kids always sense when adults are lying. When the door shut, I faced them. "In the listing. Now." Chloe crossed her arms. "It's just for extra money." Mom said. "Mom didn't say that." I cut in. Brandon stood. "You really want to make this ugly?" "It already is." He stepped closer, smelling of beer and salt. "You think you can control everything because you've got degrees and money. But family doesn't work that way." "Neither does theft," I said. For a second, the air crackled. Two men, two definitions of power. Then Mom appeared, pale, shaking. "Please, stop." I lowered my voice. "Mom, go sit with Dad." She hesitated, then obeyed, tears in her eyes. Brandon muttered, "See? Even she's scared of you." That sentence hit harder than it should have, because a small, awful part of me wondered if he was right. When they finally left the room, I sat in the silence they'd poisoned. The ocean crashed outside, steady as a pulse. I pulled out my laptop, Opened every file deed. Trust. HOA. One click away from reporting them. But my hand hovered. It wasn't fear that stopped me. It was grief. Grief that the people I'd spent a lifetime protecting had turned into my adversaries. Outside, the wind picked up, slamming a window shut. The sound made me flinch. It felt like the house itself was tired of being polite. The next few days blurred into something half-real, like a fever dream that smelled of ocean rot and burnt coffee. I drove back to Boston because my shift demanded it, but my mind stayed at the coast. Every beep of the monitor in the OR felt like a reminder that somewhere, my family was unraveling again. On Tuesday morning, I got the text I'd been waiting for and dreading. From Mom, Ethan, please don't be angry. Chloe just wants to help manage things. Attached was a photo of a welcome guests. Chalkboard hanging in the entryway of Blue Harbor House. Under it, in Brandon's handwriting, were Wi-Fi details and a QR code for coastal stay rentals. They hadn't just crossed the line, they'd turned it into a business model. I sent one text back. I'll be there by sunset. When I arrived, there were strangers hauling luggage up the steps. A couple in matching sweatshirts smiled at me. You must be the owner? The woman said. We booked the whole week. My jaw locked. Not anymore. Inside, Chloe rushed forward. Ethan, wait. I raised a hand. Get them out. Now. Her eyes darted toward Brandon, who stood by the kitchen island, beer can in hand like it was a prop. You can't just cancel on people, he said. We already got paid. Then you'll refund them. He snorted. Good luck with that. That was the moment I stopped arguing. Arguing assumed both sides had reason. What I needed was proof. I called the platform, reported the fraudulent listing, attached ownership documents. The representative's tone shifted the moment she saw the trust name. The Walker Family Living Trust. We'll suspend the account immediately, she said. When I hung up, Chloe's face drained of color. Why are you doing this? Because this isn't yours. You think everything has to belong to someone. She snapped. That's your problem. You don't share. I stared at her, the girl who once painted stars on our ceiling when the power went out, who used to whisper that we'd both get out one day. Somewhere between then and now, she'd learned to rename selfishness as love. The next day, things turned ugly online. Someone had posted a clip from my confrontation, chopped and edited to look like I was screaming at my parents. The caption read, Dr. kicks elderly parents out of home. Within hours, it had hundreds of shares. Chloe's name wasn't on it, but her fingerprints were all over the phrasing. Some people think money buys them family. I watched the video, once, twice, then closed my laptop before rage could turn into something worse. My phone buzzed endlessly, texts from coworkers, distant relatives, even patients. Each message said the same thing. Is this true? I didn't respond. Instead, I emailed the HOA, attaching screenshots of the Airbnb page, the trust, and the viral video. Mr. Gordon replied within minutes. We'll handle this. You're not alone in this fight. It was the first time anyone had said that to me. That evening, I drove back to the coast again. The sky was orange, the kind of color that looks beautiful from far away but feels like warning up close. Mom was waiting on the porch, her eyes red, her cardigan buttoned wrong. She says you hate us, she whispered. I don't, I said. I'm just done letting her decide what love costs. Inside, Brandon was on the phone, pacing. When he saw me, he hung up, grinning. Guess what, Doc? HOA can't touch me. You're just scared to lose control. I walked past him, calm. No, Brandon. I'm scared of what happens when control is all you've got left. He laughed, but it sounded thin. You can't kick us out. We've got rights. You'll find out what you really have soon enough, I said. That night, after everyone went to bed, I set my laptop on the dining table. The house was dark except for the glow of the screen and the sound of waves smashing rocks below. I uploaded every piece of evidence to a folder called For Truth. Then I drafted an email to the HOA board, to the rental platform, to the county clerk, each one precise, unemotional, irrefutable. When I hit send, the room felt different, not peaceful, just finally honest. The next morning, Brandon woke up to a message on his phone. Listing removed. Account banned for policy violation. I found him standing by the window, jaw tight, fists clenching. He turned to me. You think you've won? No, I said quietly. I think I've stopped losing. For a second, Neither of us moved. Then Dad shuffled into the room, gripping his cane, his voice steady for the first time in months. "If you two are finished," he said, "I'd like my house back." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut through years of denial. And for the first time, I saw something flicker in Brandon's eyes, not rage. Fear. The living room felt colder than the ocean outside. Mom sat on the couch, hands clasped like she was praying for this to end. Dad was by the window, his cane resting against the wall, his jaw set tight. Brandon stood near the kitchen island, his confidence cracked but not gone. Chloe hovered behind him, mascara streaked, arms crossed like armor. I placed my leather folder on the coffee table. "Everyone, sit down," I said. My voice was calm, surgical. "We're going to end this today." Brandon laughed. "You think you can just come in here and order people around?" "Not people," I said. "Thieves." His grin twitched. "Careful, Doc. That's defamation." I opened the folder. Not if it's true. 5 documents, neatly arranged. The first, the deed. "This house is legally owned by the Walker Family Living Trust," I said, sliding it across. "Lifetime residents, Henry and Margaret Walker. Not you, not Chloe, no one else." Brandon glanced down, then smirked. "Big words. Still my family." I tapped the second page. "Trust agreement. I'm the trustee, responsible for my parents' well-being. That means if anyone threatens their peace, I remove them." Chloe scoffed. "You wouldn't." I met her eyes. "You've mistaken my silence for weakness." The third document, a color printout of the Airbnb listing. "Here's your account, Coastal Stay Management, under your name, Brandon. Your bank details are right there." He went pale. "You hacked me?" "No. Dad forwarded the confirmation email you sent him by accident." Chloe shifted. "It was just to help with bills. You know how much the property tax is?" "I prepaid 20 years. I cut in." "You never asked because you didn't care. You only saw what you could take." Her mouth opened, then closed again. I laid down the fourth paper, a printout of their text thread. "You said," and I quote, "he always caves when Mom cries. You were counting on guilt as leverage. You've been doing it since we were kids." Mom let out a small sob. "Chloe." Chloe looked away. "I was just manipulating." I finished. Brandon slammed his beer on the table, foam spilling. "You done yet?" "Almost." I held up the last page. "The HOA rules." My finger traced a single line. "Short-term rentals are strictly prohibited. You broke community law, state law, and federal trust law." His face twisted. "You think anyone's gonna side with you after that video?" "I already sent everything to the HOA, the rental platform, and the county. They have copies of this entire folder." Brandon's bravado wavered. "You'd really throw family under the bus?" I looked at my parents. "Family isn't supposed to throw you first." For a moment, silence. The only sound was the ocean outside, relentless and sure. Then Brandon laughed again. Louder, desperate. "What? You gonna kick us out? Go ahead. Tough guy. You in what army?" I turned my phone around, screen glowing. Victor's parked 2 houses down. The locksmith. His smirk vanished. "You wouldn't dare." I texted one word. "Now." Outside, the sound of a van door sliding open. Footsteps on gravel. Chloe's voice cracked. "Ethan, stop. Please. Stop," I said. "That's all I've ever done. Stop the bleeding. Stop the fights. Stop everyone from falling apart. But this, I finish." Brandon lunged for the papers. I stepped aside, calm, precise. "Touch that folder, and I'll call the sheriff. You'll be out before the ink dries." He froze. The doorbell rang. Victor entered quietly, tool bag slung over his shoulder. "Which lock, sir?" "The front and back," I said. "On it." The sound of metal shifting filled the room. Brandon's face went red. "You can't do this." Dad finally stood, voice steady. "He just did." It stopped Brandon cold. The old man he'd mocked now looked like iron. Mom's tears fell silently. "Ethan." I kneeled beside her. "You don't have to apologize anymore." She nodded, trembling. Chloe wiped her face. "You're cruel," she whispered. "You're abandoning us." "No," I said softly. "I'm ending the part where you abandon responsibility." Victor finished, handed me the new keys. I placed them in Dad's palm. "Your house, your peace." Brandon stared at the door, realizing he no longer held any power. You think this is over? I smiled, cold and tired. It's just beginning. For once, you'll face consequences without me cleaning them up. They packed in angry silence. Boxes thudding, doors slamming, muffled curses. Outside, gulls screamed over the surf. When they finally left, Chloe paused at the door. You'll regret this, Ethan. I looked past her, at my father standing taller than I'd seen in years. Maybe, but at least I'll regret it in a quiet house. She didn't answer. The SUV engine roared, tires spitting gravel. The sound faded into the sea wind. I exhaled, the first full breath in months. Mom's shoulders shook as she whispered, "What happens now?" I glanced at the locked door, at the keys in Dad's hand. Now, I said, we start living in a house that finally means home. Outside, Victor nodded once before driving off. The sky was turning gold. The air smelled like salt again. For the first time, the sound of the ocean didn't feel like warning. It felt like relief. The silence after they left didn't feel like victory. It felt like the moment after a storm, when the air is too still, too clean, and you start to notice what the wind broke. I stood by the window, watching the SUV disappear down the curve of the hill. For months, I'd been preparing for war, but I hadn't planned for peace. Mom sat at the table, staring at the new keys. I didn't want it to come to this, she whispered. It had to, I said. Otherwise, they'd never stop taking. She nodded. Slow. You think she'll forgive you? She doesn't need to, I said. Forgiveness is just another currency she spends when she wants something. Dad chuckled quietly from his chair. Guess the old man still has something worth guarding. I smiled at that. The house looked different now, emptier, yes, but honest. The fake laughter was gone. The air smelled like salt and lemon polish again. I opened the windows, letting the wind sweep through, taking the remnants of their chaos with it. That night, I stayed over. I installed the new alarm system, programmed a doorbell camera that chimed with a ridiculous cartoon smile. Mom laughed when it played. At least the house is happy, she said. Before bed, I gave her a small USB drive labeled for emergencies. Inside were copies of the trust, the HOA rulings, the deed, and a note that read, "If they come back, you don't need to call me. Just forward this." In the morning, the sun rose pink over the water. Dad made coffee, humming under his breath. Mom leaned on the counter, calm in a way I hadn't seen since childhood. For the first time, they looked like people living, not surviving. But the peace didn't last long. By noon, my phone buzzed with a string of notifications posts tagged with my name, clips of the confrontation, captions twisted into something grotesque. "Money makes monsters," one read. Another, "Doctor throws out his own blood." And there she was, Chloe, posting smiling selfies from a diner 2 towns over, writing long paragraphs about toxic control and greedy siblings. Thousands of likes, sympathy from strangers. She'd always been good at performance. I didn't comment. I didn't defend. I simply forwarded everything to my attorney and to Mr. Gordon at the HOA. Then I set an auto-reply for her emails. All communication regarding Blue Harbor House is managed through legal counsel. It wasn't rage anymore, it was precision. A few days later, the rental platform sent a confirmation. Coastal stay management permanently banned. Associated accounts under investigation. A quiet satisfaction washed over me, not triumph closure. Revenge didn't come with fireworks. It came with paperwork, patience, and proof. That weekend, I returned to Blue Harbor. The deck glowed white under late afternoon light. Mom was gardening. Dad was labeling the breaker box. They looked lighter. I joined them for dinner: grilled fish, lemonade, the sound of waves crawling under our words. For an hour, we talked about groceries, about the neighbor Janice leaving shells in a jar on the fence, about nothing important, and yet, it was everything. When I left, Mom walked me to the door. "You're not angry anymore," she said. "No," I told her. "I'm just done renting my peace out to chaos." She smiled, kissed my cheek. "That's my boy." Driving back, I passed a car parked on the shoulder, dark windows, engine idling. My chest tightened for a second, but the car didn't move. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it wasn't. I smiled anyway, because whatever came next, I was ready. I'd learned something no one ever taught me growing up. You don't have to destroy your family to defend your peace. You just have to stop paying their ransom. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own family, hit that subscribe button because sometimes the quiet ones, the fixers, the givers, the ones holding everything together are the ones who break last. Tell me where you're watching from and if you've ever had to choose peace over blood. This story isn't over. The truth about what happens when boundaries meet betrayal, that's coming next. And trust me, you don't want to miss how far people will go when the door they used to kick open finally locks behind them.